intellect should lift you higher than yourself. But that's not what happens if you use your intellectual soul and study chemistry, geometry, physics, astronomy, sciences, and then you're more arrogant and full of yourself. You didn't go up, you went down. The Rebbe is explaining the nearness of the Noahide, as it says in Ethics of the Fathers, that the Noah is dear because he's created in the Tselem Elokim, in the form of God. What does this mean, the form of God? God has no form. God's not physical. The form of God is the intellectual soul. So the Noahide has this intellectual soul. And through this intellectual soul, the Noahide is serving because the intellectual soul transcends limits. It ascends. The person ascends with his intellect to higher than self and has a relationship with God. So great. You have an intellectual soul, Tselem Elokim, this form of God, and you're transcending self and connecting to God. No, that's actually not the protocol, because the protocol is that a Jew gets involved. The Jews were commanded to bring the non-Jews to a relationship with God. The non-Jews becoming, it's fulfilling their mission, serving God by keeping his laws, is through the Jew, because the Jew was thus commanded by the giving of the Torah. And we said, wait, why are we rewriting history? Adam, the first man, he was the first Noahide. No, he got the seventh law because only by Noah could you eat meat. He's the ultimate Noahide, fulfilling all seven. So why does a person have to have this connection to the Jew, as a Jew is commanded by the giving of the Torah, and through that serve God as a Noahide? Why don't you just go back in the historical lineage and serve God? Because so did Adam, so did Noah, and following in the lines of your illustrious forefathers, you're serving God. No, not good enough. Maimonides says the human is serving God because the Jew so received this command by the giving of the Torah. So the way Maimonides legalizes it, every human being needs this Jew to connect him to God. Why? You're already created in the image of God. You have this intellectual soul. You have the history. Why do you need the Jew connecting you to God? Any questions on what I've said so far?
So the Jew is to connect us to the teaching of the Torah and how to live. Is that correct?
The Jew is supposed to connect that the Noahide will fulfill the 7 laws of Noah, and that we're fulfilling the 7 laws of Noah because the Jew was so commanded by the giving of the Torah. And that's what we're questioning. Why does it have to be through the Jew? For the Jewish people, our connection to God and our commandment goes back to the giving of the Torah. Even though Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob kept some commandments before the giving of the Torah, and the Jewish people kept some commandments before the giving of the Torah, but that's not why we keep the commandments. Our commandments have nothing to do with theirs, have nothing to do with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the Jews prior to the giving of the Torah, because once the Torah was given, everything changed. Then we became God's people. Then the world was able to absorb spirituality. Until then, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, much holier than us, but their commandments didn't penetrate the physical world. Jacob had this whole spiritual service through sticks and peeling them. Amazing. But at the end of the day, they were sticks. Little me can do what he and none of my forefathers could, because after the giving of the Torah, the barriers between the physical and spiritual shatter. And when I, or any Jew does it, we change the spirituality of every physical item. And before the giving of the Torah, we couldn't change the spirituality of a physical item. We could serve God with the physical, but we didn't impinge on the spirituality of the physical at all. So for a Jew, connecting my commandments to the giving of the Torah makes a lot of sense. Commandments completely changed by the giving of the Torah, because only then did the barriers between physical and spiritual shatter. Until then, there was spiritual, there was physical, and the Jew did not connect. But after the giving of the Torah, the spirituality of the physical shifts to God. So we literally change the physical, because we're literally changing the spirituality of the physical every time we serve God. And that's why all of our commandments go back to the giving of the Torah, because that's when that happened. That's when the barriers between physical and spiritual shattered. But why is a Noahide's commandments contingent on a Jew who received this by the giving of the Torah? So to understand that, we want to understand this idea of this Tselem Elokim. We said The human is precious to God because he was created in the form of God, Tselem Elokim, which we unpack to explain means the intellectual soul. And there's a difference between the intellectual soul of a Jew and a non-Jew, because an intellectual soul is not a godly soul. A Jew is a godly soul. A Jew is an animal soul. A non-Jew has an animal soul. Noahide's animal soul is different than the animal soul of a regular non-Jew. But neither Noahide nor a regular non-Jew has a godly soul. But both the Jew and the non-Jew possess an intellectual soul, higher than the animal and lower than the godly. But the intellectual soul of the Jew is different than that of the non-Jew. In what way? The intellectual soul of a Jew has a certain spiritual to it. It's not spiritual. It's not godly. It's an intellectual soul. It's intellect. It's the thing transcending self to understand. And in a Jew, that intellectual soul has a refinement, has a spirituality. And the intellectual soul of a non-Jew doesn't have. The intellectual soul of a non-Jew is just intellect. It doesn't have that natural tendency towards spirituality and refinement. The reason why the intellectual soul of a Jew is different than the intellectual soul of a non-Jew is not inherently, they're both intellectual souls. But by the Jew, his intellectual soul is under the influence of his godly soul. There's the godly soul, then the intellectual soul, and then the animal soul. And the godly soul is impacting the intellectual soul of the Jew. So it's not just intellect, it's intellect flavored with God. And therefore, there's a natural tendency to godliness and spirituality and refinement in the intellectual soul of a Jew, which is not so in the intellectual soul of a non-Jew, because there's no godly soul impacting. We see that when a regular human is using his intellectual soul, which is what you use to understand, we're not talking about using your animal soul and it's all emotions and impulses and indulgences. You're learning a science. You're transcending the limits of the human mind to get higher, to ascend, to understand the natural world around you. That's pure intellectual soul, not animal. But when a human being does that, generally, it leads to ego. And that's because intellect is about finding the truth of something. Intellect is about escaping the barriers and limits of you, of the human, of the mind. Intellect should lift you higher than yourself. But that's not what happens if you use your intellectual soul and study chemistry, geometry, physics, astronomy, sciences, and then you're more arrogant and full of yourself. You didn't go up, you went down. We're not at all connecting it to anything inappropriate or lustful or indulgent. No, because all that we understand is not the pure intellect. That's your animal intellect, right? If you have a desire to get something that's not yours, and your mind cannot and schemes and figures out how you could steal something from someone else, that's not your intellectual soul at work. That's your animal soul. That's the animal. And the animal also has an intellect. Animals have brains, small brains, but brains. But the brains of the animal are under the control of the emotions of the animal. The brains of the animal are small, and the instincts, the emotions of the animal are big. So by the animal, yes, the animal uses its brain to find food and find protection and find water. But all of this is driven by emotion, the desires for the food, the protection, the water. So human being, when he has an animal impulse, when he wants something and desires something, wants to indulge in something, and he's using his mind to figure out how he can get this indulgence, how he could steal, how he could take what he's coveting from someone else, how he could amass more money and power and wealth to aggrandize himself. This is all the intellect of the animal. So we understand the intellect of an animal is an animal. And therefore, obviously, when you're using the intellect of your animal, when you're using your mind to attain your animal desires, it makes sense that it's pulling you down, not up. But if you're using your mind really as a mind, really to learn and understand the world around you, it's not godly, but it's not indulgence. So why is that pulling you down? Why is that bringing you to ego and aggrandizement of self and feeling superior to people around you that don't have the same knowledge you have? The Rebbe explains that the reason why it happens that way is because when a person is studying science and nature, they're really studying the world. And the world, by definition, exists as if it's separate from God. So when a person is understanding the world, they're really connecting their energy to something that seems and appears separate from God. And as such, when your intellectual soul is connecting to that energy of separation, that's what rubs off you. So instead of feeling connected to God, instead of feeling one with God, or feeling the awe of the natural world, which should be a humbling experience. Wow, look at this majestic world around me that God created. If instead of feeling that, I'm feeling full of myself because, wow, I understand so much that the plebeians don't, it's because my intellectual soul, which should be making me transcend self and rise, is not, because it's connecting to world. And since world itself has this sense of self, this sense of separation from God, so as I'm studying it and connecting my energy to it, I'm absorbing that vibe. I'm also feeling more and more self and more disconnected from God and separate and ego. Any questions on that?
I don't have any questions, but I just have a comment. By learning from the Jews, like we're supposed to do, I have overcome a lot of the intellect and grown to come to more close to away from the animal soul into the intellectual part of what Hashem has for us.
If I'm understanding you, Dixie, you're saying through connecting to the Jews, you've managed to transcend this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That is exactly what the Rebbe is going to say.
Oh, good.
You got it. You already got to the punchline. Perfect.
Yeah, one
Plus 5 stars. You got
Oh,
5
good.
stars.
Thank
That's
heaven.
exactly the point.
the thing I found most connecting with the Jews was in the study of the Parsha with them. It helped me understand and grow closer to God and to seek Him depth before.
Even though you spent your life connecting to God.
It gave me a different path and a different light that helped me get closer than I was.
Yes. And again, that's the point the Rebbe is going to say. The point of this talk is not like, where are the Jews? No. Our overarching question is, why is Maimonides saying that the non-Jew is serving God because of the Jew bringing him to serve God, because of the Jew being thus commanded by the giving of the Torah? So what the Rebbe is developing here is because that's a necessary piece. And I think what Carol's saying is very strong, because I know Carol said from when she was a young child, she connected to God, she believed in God, she rejected anything else, she devoted her life to understanding God, and only in the last 10 years did she learn and become a Noach. And she's saying she sees the difference, and this is really the point the Rebbe is making here. So yeah, Carol very strongly experienced it because she had a lifetime of working on herself, and then God opened her up to another dimension when she's being helped by Jews to connect to God. And that is exactly the point the Rebbe is making in this talk. So let's learn it. And then I hope other people have had the same beautiful, natural understanding of what we're learning because you've lived it. So Dixie lived it and Carol lived it. And I hope many other people here have lived it. So the Rebbe's point, again, is an intellectual soul is intellect. Intellect naturally should bring us to transcend self. But we see when people learn intellect, academics, they develop more ego. They're not transcending self, they're falling. And the Rebbe said, why? And the Rebbe answered by saying, because when you're learning of the world, your energy is connecting to that which you're learning, the world. And the world naturally experiences itself as separate from God, which is not true. Nothing is separate from God. But the world experiences itself as separate from God, just as we can experience ourselves as separate from God. Though we are not separate from God, everything is separate from God, but everything experiences itself as separate from God. So when my power of intellect is connecting to all these things that are all, I exist separate from God's existence. I exist separate from God's existence. So that rubs off on my power of intellect, on my intellectual soul. And that makes my intellectual soul full of the I exist, I'm separate, I exist, I'm separate, which means self and not the natural nullification to God. Now, really, the exact same thing should happen when a Jew studies. Because again, we're not talking about studying godliness. If we were doing that, we'd be using our godly soul. We're talking about studying the world. We're studying science. We're studying chemistry. We're studying physics. So if we're studying the natural world, the same thing should happen to the Jew. The world says I, and the intellectual soul should absorb that I. And as you study, it should become an ego trip. What saves the Jew? Because, as we said, the godly soul of the Jew is impacting the intellectual soul of the Jew. So when the intellectual soul is studying, it's approaching the world from a sense of nullification to God. It's not approaching the world as intellect. It's approaching the world as intellect subservient to God. When your intellect is subservient to God, you can study and absorb the self around you, but you're going to filter out self and only take the knowledge. You're not going to take the ego dripping self. What's protecting you? Your mind's nullification to God. How is my mind nullified to God? Because my soul is nullified to God, and my soul impacts my mind, my physical human mind. That my human mind, as it's written, has a natural tendency to godliness, to spirituality, to sensitivity to God, to refinement to God. And therefore, naturally, when my mind is immersing itself in the world, I see the God in the world. So if I'm learning something, my mind should come and bring me to, wow, God, look at this unbelievable, majestic world of yours. I'm studying biology. I'm studying anatomy. Wow, God, look how you created the human being. I'm studying the physical properties of the world. Wow, God, look how you created a world so perfectly designed for human life. I'm studying the planets. Wow, God, look how you made Earth. Not too close, not too far, exactly where humans can exist and serve you. So everything that my intellectual soul is assimilating is within the paradigm of my nullification to God. And that's how I process it. So instead of studying the astronomy and feeling so great because I know so much, I'm feeling the wonder and awe of God in creation. So the more I learn, the more nullified I am. Studying the world, instead of bringing me to aggrandizement, instead of bringing me to an ego trip, it brings me to more humility because everywhere I look, I see God. And it's awesome and it's humbling. But the only reason I go that way is because my mind already is going that way before I started. Because my mind is influenced by my soul to put everything through that filter, just like any of us. If you have certain experiences that very much imprinted themselves on you, you see through that. If you're very into health, then whatever you process as healthy, not healthy, good for you, bad for you, and gets channeled in those boxes because that's how you look at your world. And for a Jew, the imprint of the brain is already nullification to God because the godly soul has influenced the intellectual soul to look at the world with a bent toward God. Now, this all explains why we're saying that we want the Noahide to serve God, not because that's what humans have been doing since the beginning of time, not because they have this historical imperative. No, we want them to serve God because there's a Jew that's getting involved and bringing them to serve God. Why? What do we now understand as the advantage? Because when a Jew connects to a non-Jew and helps the non-Jew connect to God, the energy of the Jew is connecting to the energy of the non-Jew. So now the intellectual soul is absorbing this paradigm. So now their mind, instead of leading them to ego, is bringing them to God. So if the non-Jew is serving God because we found out, and historically, or on his own, he figured it out, like Carol did, that's good, that's great. But it doesn't escape the trap of self because we're stuck in self. That's the human condition. But the Jew can transcend self because of the godly soul. And the non-Jew can transcend self when the non-Jew's connection to God is through a Jew. Because then the Jew's is now connecting to the non-Jew, and now their intellectual soul also can have this natural movement of vocation to God. So as they study, instead of feeling more and more self, they can feel more and more humbled and awed by God in the world, in the spiritual, and in their lives. So Carol and Dixie said this before I said it. Anyone else have had this experience where they've actually seen this difference? Have you seen how it shifted you, that you look at the world and see it more through nullified eyes?
Definitely. For sure. I miss it a lot. I do. Yeah.
Me too. Danielle and I used to learn together,
Oh.
and she lived in my neighborhood. That was really special.
I thought about this last week after our class, and it
Wow.
occurred to me that maybe helping us find self is taking the knowledge that we're learning and sharing it with others and implementing it. That might be part of getting away from the ego.
That is beautiful. I think you're very right. As long as you keep that God-centered reality, if you're giving someone else with this sense of God, I want to be your conduit. So what I've received, I can now give to others. I've received the water. Now I want to share that water. I want to water others. I received the moisture. Now I want to moisten others. That's a beautiful expression of God. I'm your vehicle. I'm your tool. Work through me. Use my mouth, use my eyes, use my heart. And when you put yourself in that space, it's a very nullified space, because you're really saying to God, God, I just want your energy to flow through me to help other people. And that's definitely a wonderful vehicle of taking this knowledge and sharing it and connecting others, because maybe the other person isn't going to connect to a Jew and have that relationship, but maybe through you they can.
Or they might be too far from a Jewish community, and that's something we can work on as Noahides.
Yes. There's geographic far and there's other far. So they just might never connect in that way. Through you, they can. So you're the conduit. You're the middleman, taking this Jewish energy. They're saying when they have the Jewish piece, then they can take that energy within self and they can go on its wings. As the Jew is gifted by the godly soul to transcend self, the Noahide, through that connection, gets that advantage, and they also can transcend self. So you're saying, I'm another link in the chain. There's the Jew. There's me, who's learning from the Jew. Then there's the other non-Jew who doesn't have that direct connection to the Jew, but through me, they do. So the Jew, through Sabra, to the other person who now is connected and therefore gaining that advantage. That's beautiful.
And then that person may be able to connect with another Jew and pass it
Maybe
along.
that person will connect with another non-Jew and pass it on. Maybe they'll help another person who will help another person who will help another person. We never know how far it can go. When you pass a spice shop, you should smell of spices. You should pick up the scent. You pass a perfume shop, you absorb the smell, right? You walk into the shop and the shop has so much perfume smell, you just became perfumed automatically. So it's like you have the perfume and now you're sharing that and passing that perfume on to someone else. Since you absorb so much perfume, when someone's with you, they become perfumed. They become second degree perfumed. And then maybe someone else will become third degree perfumed. And it can travel and travel. And then you're right. Maybe some of them will be inspired to go seek out their own direct connections to Jews. And maybe not, but they still got some of your perfume.
Okay.
Beautiful thought. Anyone else?
It just dawned on me. I had a granddaughter of mine who came to me and was talking to me, and eventually she became a Noahide. Now she has moved to a place where there is a Chabad house, and she is connecting with them.
Beautiful. So you connected her to God, to the Jews, and now she has her direct connection to the Jews.
When people now, because I study with the Jews and very connected with you guys, I get people asking questions. They always come to me with a question about the Jews. And I'm thankful because I can answer them honestly. But I have learned so much of how different we all are as humans. But we're all connected, we're all one, and there's one Torah, and it's for all of us. And we're to learn that Torah through the Jews. Otherwise, we don't have it right.
Absolutely. There's only that one Torah. Somebody once came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and asked, could there be life on other planets? And the Rebbe said, there might be life, but there can't be intelligent life. intelligent life will only be on planet Earth, because life without serving God has no purpose. And to serve God, you need Torah. And there's only one Torah, no more than one Torah. And our Torah wouldn't make any sense on another world where the different atmospheric conditions, different physical properties. Our Torah talking about money and oxen and wool and planting and seasons and moons and suns. That Torah is designed for planet Earth. That Torah only works on planet Earth. So the Rebbe said, therefore, there only can be intelligent life on planet Earth. Because in any other world, if there was intelligent life, Torah wouldn't work. Life without Torah, no point. Different Torah, impossible. So therefore, there can't be intelligent life. There's one Torah, and it's for this world. And therefore, yes, absolutely. For every human being on this world, they're all part of that one Torah. There's always the hope. There's the movement toward God. And of course, there's the redemption. And redemption means it's an entire world of people that will all be serving God as one.
It says there will be. Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Ain't old be the clod. And so that's what we're headed for. And people that I would never have believed would come out of Christianity have come out.
And this is everybody's journey. Take this and run with it because it's yours. And really, it's a beautiful lesson. It's such an uplifting concept that for me as well, for all of us, yeah, we're human. And as humans, we're stuck. But we're not stuck because God gave us a godly soul. And through my godly soul, I can escape my stuck, ego-driven humanity. And you can as well. It's such an amazing thing the Rebbe is saying, that a human being, by connecting to the Jew, they're passing into that perfume shop. They're getting the perfume. They just absorb it. They can absorb that nullification. They can absorb that God orientation. They can absorb the ability to transcend self. And truly, the more they learn, the more humble they are, the more they see God in the world. It's an awesome and humbling experience. So it's a beautiful gift God gave all of us. And hopefully every one of us can take it. And like I said, run with it and get closer and closer to God and more feel escaping those limits of self that I've been working on for years. This is obviously not a one-shot thing. It's work and work, but it's beautiful that we have the ability to do this work.